The story of the Idaho 4 is a story that needs to be studied on how easy it is to plant a seed and see that seed take roots. Because a lot of us are focused on the what within this particular story when we need to be talking about the why. Why it seems law enforcement did what they did. And it's abundantly obvious to me after seeing this interview. So all that being said, everything's alleged. Welcome to the point. Let's get to it.
The night of the murders, around 4 a.m., she reported hearing crying from the second floor of the home and a man's voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you."
In this case, we have a witness that lives on the second floor of that location. She hears something going on during the time of the attack. This sort of evidence is what they call testimonial evidence.
And in terms of Dylan's testimony during this particular trial, when she testifies, she's absolutely going to get eviscerated. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean what she says is going to be torn apart by the defense in a polite manner. And the jury's going to have at least a degree of doubt to what she's saying because of what she actually told law enforcement. And we talked about it in a previous video. So we don't necessarily need to dive too deep into it in this one. But a lot of what she told law enforcement didn't make its way into the probable cause affidavit. And the first question here is why?
In any trial, you're going to have physical evidence and testimonial evidence. Testimonial evidence is what people say. What does my witness say? What does my victim say? What does my suspect say? They could be telling you the truth, they could be mistaken, or they could be lying.
The surviving roommate opened her bedroom door and witnessed a masked man standing in her house. She froze as the man walked right by her and out of the sliding glass door.
And we know that to be false. This is what she actually told law enforcement.
That caveat she thought she heard is a problem. That's not at all what was said. This person was interviewed shortly after 911 was called in the afternoon of November 13th, 2022. And she was sure, when this witness was sure that she heard this particular victim go up the stairs, and then come running back down the stairs. That is not what's contained in this affidavit at all. That is important because that's misleading to the judge. That waters down what was said. So the officers water that down because they know that fact is wrong, but they don't tell the magistrate that. They also don't tell the magistrate that this witness has claimed memory problems, that this witness has claimed that she's not sure what she heard or saw was real or whether it was at a dream. And there's further statements from that witness in that police interview that said that she had too much to drink and couldn't remember. None of that is given to the magistrate. That is information that's withheld. That's credibility of the person telling law enforcement these things, and the magistrate had a right to know that whatever is laid out in here isn't exactly the way it was.
Like it or not, there's a portion of me that believes Dylan was simply just a pawn in this particular story. She was a pawn used by law enforcement to get to Bryan Kohberger. And we already know one of the other ways they got to Bryan Kohberger was through some sort of shady technique with the IGG, when they violated their own policy searching those other databases. And in terms of elaborating on the story that was told, we're going to see if it was Dylan who elaborated or if it was law enforcement.
Now, why is that? Why is not victim number 5? Could be that he didn't see her as a threat. She's not blocking the doorway. And maybe he didn't see her at all. Like, his focus is on the door. I'm getting out of here. I just killed 4 people. I want to escape as quick as possible and not even notice this person. And it could be also that, like, the game plan was to go there to kill one person. And then you go into that bedroom and that person's next to somebody else. So now you got to kill the second person. Now you hear noise downstairs. Maybe Ethan and Xana are awake and they're like, I hear somebody in the house. Someone's upstairs. And now your attention's drawn to them. And so that becomes victim 3 and 4. And then number 5 just wasn't in your route. You didn't see him or they didn't pose a threat and you're wearing a mask anyway. How could they identify you?
Pay attention to what he said. That's key to a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
From the beginning, the police said this was a targeted attack. I'm assuming during trial, we're going to learn a lot more about this case than what we know. And it could be something very specific that he was fixated on one of the female victims. When he goes to one girl, all these other people are collateral.
And this is the why to a lot of what they did. The narrative floating online by way of the probable cause affidavit is Bryan stalked and hunted these individuals. But did he stalk and hunt these individuals?
You acknowledge false that Mr. Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims. That's false. You know that to be false.
Which one?
That Mr. Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims.
Yes, I was trying not to say that because.
But you knew that was false.
I did.
Yes. And so you have now, for anybody who had never heard that before, that question is now planted into them, unqualified representation that Mr. Kohberger stalked one of the witnesses, and that's false.
That's false. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Fine.
But they needed to force that narrative. They want people to believe he stalked and hunted these people. He went to that home. He attacked those 4. One of them was intentional. The other 3 were collateral damage. They need that to happen. And here's the reason they need that to happen. When you listen to these other theories that a lot of people are putting out online, like some individuals saying this has something to do with the fraternity, because there was that 4chan post very early on that talked about a fight between one of the fraternity members and Ethan over Xana, which a lot of people initially disregarded, until we found out there was a lot within that post that was actually true. Kaylee wasn't living there at the time of this attack, and she just happened to come home at a visit. All those individuals were at different social functions that night, and there's other stuff within that post that was later on found out to be true. And other individuals are saying this has ties to something with extracurricular activities. And those ties are to a degree validated. There are certain family members within this story who have ties to extracurricular activities. Not to mention there was also that other individual who lived near the home that was also arrested for distributing something to another individual that caused them to pass. But there's a commonality between those particular theories and what the state is trying to do, even though it appears it can't be proven, and that is a connection. And here's the reason they want to focus on this connection, because it doesn't seem like they have a motive. Now, yes, I know a motive doesn't have to be proven in trial, but a motive certainly helps. And if you can't present a valid motive at a trial, while at the same time seemingly having no connection between the suspect and the victims, it's going to be very hard for a jury to find that individual guilty. Because the fact is, the number of people who just pass away individuals for the sake of passing them away is incredibly small. And it's not nearly as frequent as mainstream press in Hollywood want you to believe. So when they crafted that probable cause affidavit, they made it seem as if Bryan hunted this home. He stalked these individuals because they have to have or show some sort of connection between him and that home. The idea that an individual who has no criminal record whatsoever walks into a home filled with individuals to pass one particular person away just doesn't make sense. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we're talking about probability here. How probable is it that this happened? How probable is it that an individual who has no criminal history or no known issues or tendencies of violence that we know of going to walk in a home filled with 4 individuals and pass 4 people away? So they need some sort of connection. They need to prove that he was obsessed with one of these people. He was following one of these victims on social media. That was the narrative and that was the seed. It took root very early on and it's still growing today. Even though it is widely known if you follow these hearings that he did not stalk these individuals. He didn't follow them on social media. And that is why law enforcement took liberties with Dylan's words. That is why it seems they took liberties in this probable cause affidavit. Because as soon as they could get a judge to sign off on what they're trying to say, it makes what they're saying credible. When in fact there is no proof that we know of showing that Bryan Kohberger hunted this home or stalked one of these individuals. There is no proof showing that he had circled that home 11 or 12 times. Those cell phone towers can pick up an individual anywhere within that city. They could have picked him up at the gas station or at one of the restaurants or at one of the stores. It's the uncertainty within this story that everybody needs to be concerned about. I'm not necessarily focused on being right. I don't necessarily want to be right at this particular time. And with what's available, I don't believe being right needs to be the stance anybody's taking. I don't think anybody on this channel watching these videos wants a guilty man to walk free. But I also know we don't want to see an innocent man charged of a crime they didn't commit. There are holes and issues within this story. And the state needs to be prepared to answer these questions. What is the connection here? If there is no connection, what is the motive? To simply say he did this because he wanted to do it, but there is no necessary motive or no necessary connection isn't necessarily going to go over well with the jury, especially if they're being impartial and they're questioning things. And with the right arguments, there are other viable theories within this particular story. The connection to the frat or the connection to substances tied with that unidentified male DNA is a huge hurdle for the state. And if they're not prepared to answer those questions legitimately at trial, they have a huge problem. And in the scenario where Bryan did this, he may very well walk if they're not ready to answer those questions. What I've noticed within these hearings is they're not pushing back much at all in terms of this narrative Ann Taylor is saying. They claim to have his DNA and they claim to have his car. They seem to be sticking with that particular part of the story, but they're not answering anything in terms of a motive or a possible reason why. They're not touching anything to do with this unidentified male DNA. And in terms of what Dylan described or didn't describe, let's see who took the liberties with her words. Was it her or was it law enforcement?
The surviving roommate that witnessed the murder in the house described him as 5'10", athletically built but not muscular, with bushy eyebrows.
She only had the opportunity to see this person for a couple seconds. What could you remember in a couple seconds? And then add in, what was the lighting like? What was your state of mind? Are you just waking up? Are you kind of groggy? Or do you think something's happening and there's this fight or flight reaction your body's going through? You're not going to remember every single detail. It's actually more suspect when someone comes with a lot of detail. They're highly detailed in their description, and they give so much minutia about, oh, the person, was wearing this style of clothing and brands and all this other stuff. Just think, well, how can you remember that much from that couple seconds of time? And usually there is some sort of editorializing with that. People are adding to their memory from that.
So who editorialized with this particular statement? The idea that this suspect was 5'10" or taller and athletically built did not come from Dylan according to the court testimony we heard last week. She had apparently given a description that was a little bit shorter than what law enforcement said, and she also said the individual was skinny. And it's been said before on this channel in the comments section, and I'll say it now. What college-age female uses the words clad in black? It seems law enforcement took more liberty with her words than she did when talking to law enforcement. At least that's how I'm seeing it. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they took some liberty with her words because they needed a description to better match Bryan Kohberger. Because she clearly says she has a hard time remembering what happened that night. She clearly said that this was a dream, or she thought this was a dream. And she also said that she was out drinking. So of course her memory and her description of what happened that night is going to be muddled and hazy. But a hazy eyewitness statement isn't going to get law enforcement to Bryan. They needed something more specific. They needed something more descriptive. And it appears at this time that they added some height to what she said and they added some muscle to what she described. Because what they lacked in this story, based off what I'm seeing, is a connection between the suspect and those 4 victims. Because once again, without a connection and a valid description, what do they have? They allegedly have touched DNA left on the sheath at the home, but that sheath is not a fixed object. That is a movable object. They need way more than what they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. They've given no motive, nor have they attempted to give a motive. All we have at this particular time is speculation on what the motive could be. But with no connection and no motive, how are they going to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? And the actions of law enforcement within this story make more sense now than they ever did. It seems as if they were very liberal in this description. It seems as if they had to manufacture a connection when one didn't exist. Now, if one does exist and comes out at trial, that's fine, but we just haven't heard it right now. Which is why I'm not certain how so many people are certain he did it. Now, as always, if you disagree, please feel free to let me know down in the comments below. But if you enjoy this and more fair open coverage on this story and others, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.